The hall was quiet at first, too quiet. Every cadet knew reflex drills meant spectacle. Plasma, claws, venom, speed. They shifted restlessly, waiting to see who would move first, who would earn the loudest applause. The air felt like it was holding its breath. The instructor's voice carried across the room. Demonstrate reflex. Show us the speed of your kind. A soft hum began as energy fields activated and stinger rifles calibrated. For many here, reflex was a sacred trait ritualized, refined from birth, documented through ceremony. It wasn't just physical. It was cultural. One by one, the cadets stepped forward. A Jari cadet unfolded dual forelimbs and caught a glowing plasma sphere between his claws, the orb steaming, humming faintly as its energy bent against the contact. He held it a moment, turned it in his grip, then tossed it skyward and sliced it mid-air. It burst in a shower of blue sparks. The room erupted in appreciative hisses. Next came a Kelvosh with skin that shifted under light. He planted himself low, then danced sideways as venom darts shot from an autopod. The stingers zipped past in quick succession. His dodge timing was immaculate, each twist measured to the angle of approach. The instructor gave a small nod. Then, a Varnan cadet activated a grid of grav plates beneath her feet. They began shifting and tilting in staggered pulses. She leapt forward, each landing accompanied by a metallic thrum. She twisted midair to avoid a sudden column of kinetic discharge, landed in a roll, and popped up clean. More cheers. Applause in 3 different species rhythms. A few cadets exchanged glances. This was the standard now. Grace, spectacle, safety within limits. At the far end of the room, a Gorathi muttered low, "Reflexes. Humans barely see in the dark. This will be short." Then the instructor's gaze fell to the lone human at the edge of the line. "Your turn." The cadet stepped forward. He didn't summon a shield. He didn't raise a hand to call down tech. No suit hummed to life. Instead, he walked to the far end of the room, deliberate, steady, and reached for a supply rack on the wall. Not the section with foam spheres or simulation drones. The blade rack. He selected 6 steel throwing knives, balanced, no tech, no enhancement, just raw, sharpened alloy. The room shifted. A few heads tilted. One Varnan leaned toward another and whispered, "Is this a joke?" The human turned and walked toward another figure, another human. Cameron. Broad-shouldered, calm-eyed, the other half of an often overlooked pair. Matt Dawson handed him 3 knives without a word. Then he paced off 10 meters and turned. They faced each other. No armor, no fields, no instructions, just steel in hand and tension in the room. A nervous laugh rippled through the crowd. "What are they doing? That's not a reflex test, that's suicide. They'll stab each other before the first throw." Cameron shifted his weight. Dawson stood still, hands loose at his sides. Then the first knife flew. It snapped through the air like a breaking wire, silver flashing under the overhead lights. Dawson didn't react immediately. For a split second, it looked like it was going to hit too fast, too low. Then he twisted. The blade passed so close it brushed the fabric of his shirt, burying itself in the alloy wall behind him with a sharp thunk. Several cadets gasped. Before anyone could speak, the second knife followed. This one was higher. Dawson ducked not with panic, but with the tight, restrained movement of someone who had done this before. Another blade in the wall, 6 inches above his spine. Then came the rhythm. Cameron's throws came faster. No countdown, no cue, just pure muscle memory. Dawson moved in controlled bursts, a sidestep here, a twist there. One blade skipped past his cheek close enough to flick a strand of hair loose. The wall behind him began to fill with knives. Each strike landed where his body had been a heartbeat earlier. Each miss was skin close. The room had gone completely silent. Even the instructor, Kelvosh veteran of 3 campaigns, said nothing. His eyes tracked every motion. Another blade came low. Dawson jumped just high enough, and the knife stuck into the floor between his boots. His breath had quickened, but his eyes stayed locked on Cameron. There was no signal. No plea to stop. Cameron pulled the last knife from his belt and spun it once in his hand. Then he threw. The final blade flew flat, fast, direct. It hissed past Dawson's ear and slammed into the wall an inch from his temple. He didn't flinch. Instead, he slowly straightened. His arms relaxed at his sides. His chest rose and fell. Once, twice. He wiped a bead of sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. Then smiled. "Back home," he said, voice steady. "We call this dodgeball." No one laughed. Not this time. The wall behind him held 6 blades, each buried deep into solid alloy. The closest was less than 2 centimeters from his spine. The furthest, the one that clipped his hair, had embedded at an angle deep enough to leave a dent in the wall panel. The humans said nothing more. They walked back to their place in line, side by side. The instructor raised his wrist pad and quietly updated the performance log. He didn't write knife dodging. He didn't write reflex stunt. He typed human reflex demonstration, manual projectile evasion, close range, 0 shielding. Result, success. In a quieter field, beneath the form, he added a personal note. Extreme risk, no margin for error. Borderline insane, completely effective. He looked back at the 2 human cadets. They were chatting now, light conversation, as if one of them hadn't just missed death by the width of a fingernail. And around them, cadets whispered in awe. For Kelvosh, reflex was preservation. For Varnan, reflex was elegance. For Gorathi, it was war instinct. But for humans? Apparently, it was a game. By the next morning, the walls had been patched, but only barely. The maintenance drones had filled in the holes from the knives, smoothing the alloy surface to a dull gray sheen, but the stress marks remained. Faint craters in a grid, 6 scars from 6 throws. To anyone passing through, it might have looked like target practice, except the target had been moving, and very much alive. The hall's chatter hadn't stopped since. They used real blades. Humans aren't fast, they're just reckless. Did you see how close that last one came to his neck? Cadet Jorix, a Kelvosh known for his stoicism, was overheard saying, if he was off by even half a breath, dead. Another instructor had allegedly rewatched the footage 5 times. On the 5th, he noticed Dawson never blinked once the knives started flying. But the most unsettling part, for many, was the humans themselves. They didn't boast. They didn't downplay it. They didn't even bring it up. They just moved on. As if playing dodgeball with knives was a Wednesday. The reflex drills continued into the next day. This time, each cadet was asked to submit a formal analysis of their species' training philosophy. Most delivered what was expected, long explanations filled with cultural ritual, defensive evolution, and kinetic instinct. For the Jari, it was all about counterstrike. For the Brelak, reaction was taught through rhythm and battle chants. The Varnan focused on pre-movement prediction using eye-track algorithms. Then came the human submission. A physical page, handwritten. At the top, reflex, defined by proximity to pain. That was it. No equations, no diagrams, just a single sentence, centered on the page. The instructor looked at it for a full minute before sliding it into the accepted stack. Later that afternoon, a Kelvosh cadet named Sile quietly approached Dawson near the Hydra bench. He was lean, sharp-skulled, with a gait that suggested careful calculation in every movement. "You were grazed," Sile said without preamble. Dawson glanced up. "No. I reviewed the footage. The second-to-last blade cut a thread from your collar. Didn't touch skin." Sile didn't blink. "You stood still after the final throw. That wasn't strategic. It was psychological." Dawson smirked. "Was it? Why do it?" Dawson paused, not annoyed, just considering how much to say. "When I was 12, he began, there was a kid at summer camp who used to throw rocks at moving targets. First cans, then squirrels, then—" He stopped, shrugged. "Let's just say we figured out early that stillness buys time." CL tilted his head. "Time to do what?" "To decide, whether to dodge, whether to commit, whether to trust the thrower." CL was quiet for a moment. "You trusted him?" Dawson nodded. "Completely." Sile left without saying goodbye. That evening, someone tried to replicate the test. Cadet Tralis, a Rixari with 4 arms and a penchant for mimicry, convinced another cadet to throw rubberized trainer knives in a timed sequence while he dodged. He managed the first 3. The 4th caught him in the shoulder. Minor contusion. No break. But he didn't return to class the next day. The instructor logged the incident with a warning. Human training methods are not universal. Do not replicate without supervision. That only made the fascination worse. By the 3rd day, everyone had their own theory. It's instinct. Humans evolved under pressure. No, it's social. They choose danger because it bonds them. Maybe they don't feel fear the same way. None of them were quite right. In their dorm that night, Dawson and Cameron reviewed the throw sequence. Dawson had placed markers on the wall, tiny adhesive strips measuring each blade's strike point. From the first to the last, they formed a shallow arc, an intentional spread, measured, controlled. Second one came in too fast, Dawson noted, kneeling. If I'd moved a 10th later. But you didn't. I won't next time either. Cameron leaned against the wall, arms folded. You ever think we should stop? He asked. Might be easier to play by their rules. Dawson looked up. No, they need to see what real reflex looks like. Cameron arched a brow. And what's that? Trust under pressure. He stood and peeled off the last marker. They all practice reacting, we practice deciding. The next day, an unexpected announcement came over the comm. Reflex Trial Log 171 is now part of the Permanent Academy archive. Footage restricted to instructional use, Cadet Dawson and Cadet Cameron are not to be asked for replication without express authorization. A murmur followed. But not outrage, not laughter, just respect. Uneasy, awed. The kind reserved for something you still didn't understand, but no longer doubted. And somewhere in the admin wing, a tactical instructor logged a new training protocol into the black file directory. Designation, Reflex 9, Voluntary Exposure Evasion. Subnote, Human Method, Dodgeball Variant. Advisory, not for simulation. Field only, use with caution, unreliable unless subject possesses absolute inter-participant trust. Observed in humans only. That night, in the dark of their dorm, the humans tried again. No cameras, no audience, just 2 friends and 6 blades. This time, Dawson wore a blindfold. He stood still, heart pounding, arms loose. Cameron threw. The first blade embedded near his shoulder, a breath away. The next landed at ankle level. One by one, the knives filled the wall behind him, every throw closer than the last. But Dawson never moved. He didn't need to. And when the final blade quivered into silence, he pulled off the blindfold. Cameron stood there, arms relaxed. Dawson smiled. That's game. Reflex Day had ended, but its consequences hadn't. The Academy wasn't built to ignore anomalies, especially ones that embedded themselves into alloy walls and redefined what was considered training. By the end of the week, the instructors had reviewed the footage 8 times. Analysts slowed it frame by frame. Physics techs ran collision simulations. Even the safety division, notoriously uninterested in drama, issued a recommendation. Reclassify human dodgeball variant as high-risk discretionary training. Use restricted to bonded pairs, no public replication. But the cadets weren't reading memos, they were watching. Every interaction with Dawson had shifted. Not dramatically, not fear, not adoration. Something quieter, something stranger. Like they were still figuring out whether he was reckless or brilliant or both. Some approached cautiously, asking about his method. Others watched from afar. A few stopped speaking altogether when he entered a room. And yet, he never changed. Matt Dawson kept attending drills, running his laps, taking notes during tactics, laughing at Cameron's jokes, the same rhythm, the same quiet calm. Until one morning, when he was pulled aside before physical endurance training. The instructor waited in a private chamber off the main hall, a square room of gray metal and pale light. Cadet Dawson, he said, have a seat. Dawson Saturday, his face neutral. The instructor placed a thin black card on the table between them. It was blank. Do you know what this is? Dawson glanced down. Black file tag. The instructor nodded. I sent your footage to command. They requested you be reviewed for qualification in irregular combat reflex training. Human pattern. Voluntary exposure. Dawson didn't speak. They want you cleared for a program that doesn't exist publicly, the instructor continued. One built around individuals who can perform under true pressure. No safeties, no simulations, field-graded threat levels. He tapped the card. That means missions. Situations where failure isn't recorded, it's buried. Dawson met his eyes. What's the cost? Trust. A long pause. Then Dawson asked, Can Cameron come too? The instructor hesitated. He hasn't been evaluated yet. Then, evaluate him. The instructor folded his arms. You think he'd pass? I know he would. But... Another long silence. Not tense, just measured. Then the instructor gave a short nod. We'll see. Back in the dorm that evening, Dawson told Cameron everything. His roommate stared at him a long time before saying, They really think throwing knives makes us elite? No, Dawson said. They think not flinching when the knife's coming does. Cameron leaned back in his chair. I guess that makes sense. I always figured reflexes aren't just how fast you move, it's how fast you decide to move. Or, not move at all. Exactly. He was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, Are we actually going to do this? Dawson shrugged. We already are. 2 days later, the Academy ran an unscheduled test module. None of the cadets were told in advance, just an alert. Report to Base 6. Reflex validation, exercise. When they arrived, the room was dim and open. No platforms, no grids, just a long corridor with pressure-sensitive walls. The instructor stepped forward and addressed the group. Today's trial is not ceremonial, it's reactive. Real-world pacing. You'll be paired. One attacks, one defends. All reflexes, all choices, no resets. The room stirred. They were paired off by random draw. Dawson and Cameron were last. When their names were read, the room shifted. Everyone remembered. Everyone had seen the knives. This wasn't random, it was deliberate. Cameron was handed a set of weighted spheres, small metal orbs, designed to simulate low lethality projectiles. Fast, blunt, dense enough to bruise. Dawson stood at the opposite end. No shields. No gloves. The buzzer sounded. Cameron moved faster than most could track his first throw, already airborne before Dawson even exhaled. Dawson ducked. Sharp, clean. The sphere skipped past his shoulder and dented the wall behind. A second came low. He sidestepped, let it brush his pant leg. Third came in spinning. He twisted midair and landed on the balls of his feet. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't dare. Each throw was closer than the last. And with each dodge, Dawson looked calmer. By the fifth orb, sweat clung to his hairline. By the sixth, the room had gone utterly silent. The final throw was an overhead arc, designed to bait a backstep. Dawson didn't take it. He stepped forward instead. The orb missed by an inch and cracked against the wall behind him. He stood, centered, still. Cameron lowered his hand. Test over. The instructor walked to the console and typed something. No announcement. No summary. But everyone there felt the moment settle. This wasn't ritual. It wasn't spectacle. It was human. Later that night, the surveillance review team pulled camera logs again. Not just from the trial, but from a different feed. The dorm. Room 213B. At 0300 hours. There were two figures standing 10 paces apart. Blindfolded. They weren't speaking. One had a knife in hand. The other didn't move. The footage ended when the blade stuck into the wall 2 inches beside the blindfolded cadet's knee. No flinch. No sound. The room was still. Just two humans. Practicing trust. The next morning, the knives were gone from the practice wall. Not reassigned, not shelved, removed entirely. The Academy's quartermaster issued no explanation, but every cadet understood. Some tools belonged to the curriculum, others belonged to legend, and the knives, those belonged to something else now. Dawson and Cameron received no medals, no commendations. Their performance was logged in the restricted archives, sealed under reflex protocols, and added to an interspecies training database under the term Voluntary Close Evade Exposure Human Mode. Cadets whispered a new term in the halls. The knife test. Some thought it was about speed, others said balance, but those who'd seen it, the original, the real one, knew the truth. It wasn't about knives. It was about choosing stillness in a moment that demanded panic, choosing trust over instinct, risk over comfort, purpose over safety, and surviving. Dawson knew the attention would fade eventually, not because the moment would be forgotten, but because no one could hold on to awe forever. Even fear has an expiration date in places like the academy. Still, for a while, the world seemed to shift around him. A Kelvosh cadet who once mocked human physiology now asked quiet questions about the human nervous system. A Varnan who'd been top of her reflex module asked if Dawson's technique was a cultural right. Even the Gorathi, never impressed by subtlety, said only one thing after watching the throw simulation replay. He didn't even tense. The final evaluation week came quickly. The academy brought in external assessors, non-faculty specialists from tactical, field, and psychological divisions. Every cadet was reviewed, measured, stress-tested. On the second day, Dawson was called to a solo exam room. No gear, no simulation pod. Just a table, 2 chairs, and a single observer. A woman in civilian black with no insignia, and a tablet she didn't bother looking up from. "You passed the knife trial," she said without greeting. "Yes." "You let another person throw sharpened alloy at you." "Yes." "Why?" Dawson paused. "Because I knew he wouldn't miss. Lots of species say they trust each other." "I didn't say it," Dawson replied. I stood still. The woman raised her eyes, studied him a moment, then set the tablet down. "There's a unit on the frontier. Small, fast, built for precision entry and threat reaction. They don't ask for volunteers, they watch for them. And they watched your tape." Dawson said nothing. "They're not recruiting you," she added. He relaxed slightly. "Yet." She stood, picked up her tablet, and walked out. On the final night before dispersal, Dawson sat on the balcony outside the dorm quad. Cameron joined him, tossing a small weighted sphere between his hands. "You realize," Cameron said, "we could have just dodged the training drones like everyone else." Dawson smiled faintly. "Would have been easier. Safer. Boring." They sat in companionable silence for a while. Then Cameron asked, "You think they'll ever really understand?" "Who?" "The rest of them, the others, all these species that have never had to trust someone with their life just to get through a game." Dawson looked out over the academy courtyard, the distant stars reflecting in the glass tiles below. "I think they're starting to." Cameron tossed the ball a final time and caught it. "You still flinch when I say knife?" Dawson shook his head. "Only when you throw it blind." The official debrief came the next morning. Each cadet received their performance file. Most were stamped complete. Some were flagged for additional cycles. A few, very few, were tagged with black markers. Dawson's file was simple. 1-sentence summary under reflex field evaluation. Demonstrates lethal level response control under live edge exposure. And below that, a private note from the instructor. In the end, speed matters less than conviction. Dawson didn't win because he moved fast. He won because he knew exactly when not to. That night, the knives reappeared, but only in private. In the dorm, with the door locked, Cameron and Dawson laid out the same 6 blades on a folded towel. "I was thinking," Cameron said, tying the blindfold around his own eyes, "maybe this time, we switch." Dawson didn't argue. He stepped back 10 paces, picked up the first knife, and weighed it in his hand. He waited. Cameron stood still. The throw was fast, quiet, perfect. The blade sank into the wall an inch from Cameron's shoulder. No flinch.